Do you have a dream in your heart that you're too afraid to pursue? Have you ever wondered what would happen if you trusted God with that dream? Joining me now is award-winning humanitarian, missionary, founder of the international social venture Kitesong Global, and author of the new book, Dream Brave, Dr. Wai Jia Tam. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street. Wai Jia, we're so thankful that you're joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Lara. It's my joy to be here.
Oh, well, you know, you have an incredible personal story, and there's so many different layers to your story. Of course, you know, as I said, you're an award-winning humanitarian. You work with the World Health Organization, the United Nations. You've done missionary work. You're a practicing doctor. So many layers to who you are, and big dreams, but they really started in a small dream. Tell us a little bit more about this book, Kitesong. And I know we're going to talk about Dream Brave, but there was a whole journey that got you to the beginning of where you are today.
Wow. Thank you, Lara. So when I was 18 years old, I did something really crazy, I guess. I begged my dad to let me take 6 weeks off to stay at a children's home. But nobody would have expected that during my stay, that all of us would be traumatically evicted. And these were girls who had been abused and abandoned already, and now being ejected from the home that was supposed to protect them. And I soon learned from the missionary house parents that this happened year after year because of the stigma that landlords placed on unwanted girls. So when I left Nepal, I just felt God put a little dream in my heart. I was a new believer then, but that dream was to do something for these girls to change their lives. And so I felt the Holy Spirit put a blueprint for a book called Kitesong to be published. And that little picture book, which I illustrated, raised over $100,000 to purchase a new home for the girls. And so in my living room is a picture of the same girls seated in nearly the same positions, seated side by side, but 10 years apart. And that speaks to me of the power of small dreams when we put them in the hands of a big God.
Incredible. And that girls' home that you purchased in Nepal for these young girls who had already gone through so much, it's changed their lives. And, you know, you've taken a lot of this and put it in your book, Dream Brave. And a lot of principles in this book are so interesting. And you've got 20 personal stories in there as well, not just this bigger story of Kitesong and the work you've done in that regard. Now, you know, when you think back to when you were 17 years old, 18 years old, you were a new believer.
Yeah.
You know, you felt led to create this picture book, and you weren't even an experienced artist yet. And for so many of us, and you touch on this in Dream Brave, when God gives us, you know, a dream in our hearts, there's always this season of wrestling with it and not sure if we can do it, and insecurity and fear. And you went through that when you were trying to raise that first $100,000 for that girls' home in Nepal. How do we face those insecurities and fears in the early stages of our dreams?
Wow. That's such a great question, Lara. I think the very first step we can take is to accept that daring to dream is a risk, because it is a huge vulnerability to put yourself out there, to dare to admit to yourself that this is a dream. I'm going to go all out in, to have faith in something that I'm not even sure will come to pass. So I think the first step is to be willing to take that risk and to be vulnerable with yourself, to say, I'm all in.
So interesting. And you know, often when we're dreaming, you know, we can go through these seasons where we are feeling so insecure about what we're considering as we move forward. In Dream Brave, there's this overarching theme of this idea that we need to speak faith into our dreams. And you're so clear and strong on that. I love that, because I was like, I don't know if I've done that, which is really interesting. Tell us more about this concept of speaking faith into our dreams.
Wow. Okay, Lara, I'm going to draw upon a darker part of my time, my lifetime. So when I was in medical school, what happened was that I struggled with anorexia and depression, and it was a dark, dark period in my life. I was suicidal at one point. I wasn't sure if I would come out of it, and I remember being seated at the edge of my dormitory window on a high-rise and wondering if I should just end it all. But God gave me a vision, and it was of me speaking to an international audience in America about my journey of healing. And I laughed at it. I mean, like, where did I get that vision from? I had very low self-esteem. I felt rejected as a child. because I was born a girl, my family had expected a boy. So I had all this kind of baggage on me, and I thought to myself, nothing good's going to come out of a name like mine. So when I received that vision, I felt grace from the Holy Spirit to speak faith into it. And for years, it never came to pass. Until I went to Johns Hopkins, and I just had this kind of a feeling that, God, would you do something? I began to think and ponder over that vision. I began to speak to God about it. And I think in some way it was speaking faith into it, because I was having a conversation with God about a vision He had given me years and years ago. And one day I just get this phone call from a woman from Nashville. And I'm like, how did you even get my number? And she says, oh, I got your book, A Taste of Rainbow, which is the book I had published when I had recovered from an eating disorder. She said, I've got the book in my hands. And it was given to me from a friend of a friend of a friend who's the colleague of your supervisor at Johns Hopkins. And I'm having this conference for Christian women who are healing from eating disorders and depression. Would you be our keynote speaker? And the conference was just a week after I graduated. So the timing was perfect.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Because in those moments when you were struggling so deeply with depression and anorexia, feeling suicidal, God gives you this vision, and you're like, that can't be.
That can't be.
And now fast forward, that beautiful book. Not only did you end up speaking to those who needed to hear that exact message of how do we get through an eating disorder, how do we get through depression and those different levels of mental health issues, you actually used that book to help fund more relief work for those who are struggling throughout the world, young girls. It's incredible when you think about the ripple effect of what God can do when we come to Him in our darkest moments.
Yes.
And, sometimes when we, when I look at your life, actually, I see so many highs of these dreams coming true. God does these amazing things.
Yes.
But then you have those moments where you had anorexia, you struggle with suicidal ideation.
Yes.
How do we find the courage again to dream when we've gone through a deep, dark season?
Wow. Lara, the person from the Bible I draw inspiration from is Joseph. I think to myself, what must he have been feeling when he was in the pit and in the prison? And something that I've just been reminded of is that sometimes when we go through those pit and prison experiences, it could be because God is preparing us for a palace that we have not yet seen. And so often we think of Joseph's story as like, maybe God compensated Joseph later in his life because of all the terrible things that had happened previously to him. But in my eyes, I feel like God precisely had to take Joseph through those pit and prison experiences because He was preparing Joseph for a greater stewardship that even he would never have begun to imagine. So remember when Joseph was a young boy and God had given him those dreams about, the moon and the sheaves and all that. It came to pass much later. But Joseph had to walk out those trials and tribulations before he could be ready to take the position that God really wanted him to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's good. And, I think every viewer watching right now is, has at some point in their life said, I have a dream. I've got a little dream. I've got a big dream. And the challenge can be for those who follow Jesus, how do I know if a dream is actually from God? If the dream in my heart is the dream that God has put in my heart, or is it just my own idea?
Wow, Lara, that is such a good question. How do I know if a dream is really from God or if it's just a whim, right?
Yeah, a whim.
Yeah. What comes to my mind is a real dream that I had, like a dream in the night. So this was happening at a time when I felt like God might be calling me to pursue my Masters of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, and I didn't have the money for it. And at the same time, God had also opened up a very prestigious position for my husband to serve in the local church in Singapore. And at that time, I was thinking, God, so which one is this? Because I knew God didn't want us to be separated, but I didn't know, I couldn't discern like which was God's dream. And I remember at night, I had a real dream, and it was this. I was flying a kite, and as I was flying the kite string snapped, the kite fell, and Cliff ran to get the kite and give it back to me. And what that dream spoke to me was this, that when we surrender all our dreams to God, when we just come to a place of complete surrender, when I had to tell God, God, if you want Cliff to pursue this, then I'll support him 100%. And likewise, Cliff had to do the same, to say, God, if you want to send Wai Jia to Johns Hopkins, I'll give up this local position. It was when we came to that full place of surrender. It is at that point when God can return the dreams that he wants to fulfill back to us. So it's always full surrender first before God can speak to us.
It's incredible. So good. I love that. Full surrender. We give it to God, and if he gives it back to us,
then it's him.
Right? It's like, yeah,
It's him.
It is him. And he will make a way. He will open those doors.
Exactly.
The hand of God on things is so apparent when his hand is really there on it.
Absolutely.
That's so interesting. You and your husband, Cliff, have a beautiful love story. I love how, I read in Dream Brave how you both saw God so much to discern whether you were to be married to each other, and so many beautiful, miraculous confirmations. Now, Cliff had his own health journey at 10 years old, having cancer of the liver, and then throughout his life, lots of challenges. And you recently had a health journey where you needed to have spinal surgery. And so many of our viewers have gone through health journeys. And I know that sometimes when we experience bad health and a challenge like that, we can be very scared to dream in life again. What would you say to them?
Wow. Lara, I cannot tell you how traumatizing it was to have been planning for our whole family to relocate to Tanzania last Christmas, only to have this spine surgery, this unexpected issue, just set us back. And at that time, I really asked God, God, are we on track? Are you telling us otherwise? Do we give the dream up? Maybe we're not even walking in your will. There were so many questions about even God's goodness. And I think something that God has really been speaking to me is the verse from Isaiah 45 about the treasures of darkness. Because I began to see that it was during the time of darkness that I could really discern what God was speaking to me. You see, when Jonah had plans to go to one place and God had a different plan for his life, it seems to me that it was God's mercy that he sent a storm. And a lot of us, we question the storm, like, God, if you're good, how can a storm happen to me? But you see, when we look at the story of Jonah, it is through God's goodness that the storm even happened in his life. And guess what? Where is God in the storm? He is in the storm. In fact, he provided the fish. And I think to myself, what was Jonah feeling when he was in the belly of the fish? He must have been in total, complete darkness. But it was through that darkness that Jonah repented, and he learned things from the Lord that he would otherwise never have learned in the light. And so when I look back on my health journey, as painful as it was, as hard as it was, I'm so thankful that God revealed to me those treasures of darkness that I would otherwise never have learned had I just been walking in the light.
Wai Jia, what you've just shared has really struck a chord in my own heart, and so powerful, and I know so meaningful for so many of our viewers who are in the darkness in this moment and trying to discern that way out and wanting to dream again. And for those viewers who are watching right now that say, I do want to dream again, I have a dream in my heart, what would you say to them?
I would say, dare to dream. Dare to dream even when you feel too small, because it is precisely then when you feel like you're not enough that we can invite God to come in and do the things that only God can do. Our little is his lot. I love that. Just like the faith of a mustard seed blossoming into a giant plant. You see, what's interesting is that we keep looking at our 5 loaves and 2 fish and we think, oh, it's so small, it's terrible, I'm nobody. But guess what? When God requires us to give him our 5 loaves and 2 fish, actually it's our everything. That little boy, it was all he had. So on one hand, it might seem very little for us to give up something to God. On the other hand, he's asking us to lay down everything for him.
And as we do that, God does great things through our faithfulness and our stewardship of those small things we have. He does things beyond what we can imagine.
He multiplies them beyond our wildest imaginings.
And that's been your life. And Dream Brave, the 20 stories in there, talking about how God is moved beyond what you can imagine or think. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. I'm so thankful for the time we've had with you. Wai Jia, thank you for this conversation, for your heart, for what you've done to help so many people around the world.
Thank you, Lara. It was my pleasure.
If you are in a season of wanting to pursue a dream that God has put in your heart, whether it's starting a new venture or changing careers, joining a community association, finding love, or taking up a new passion, it is time to dream brave. There are 20 stories in this book. There are Bible verses and moments of teaching and lessons and personal inventories you get to take as you read this incredible book by Wai Jia. To get your copy, call 1-800-265-3100 or go to crossroads.ca.